Okay, I think we can get started. We have some 20 people here for the talk. We can probably wait one more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, so to kick things off, like a just brief introduction about me. So my name is Avichal and I'm a product manager at Reliance Geo. And previously I was a tech lead and software engineer at Walmart Labs. So, well, AI, everyone's excited about AI these days, and so am I. So, I think a couple of months back, OpenAI released plugins, which I found it very interesting. So, today's talk is basically about ChatGPT plugins. We'll just briefly discuss what are ChatGPT plugins, some examples of plugins, and how we can use them. And I'm sure most of you are already aware of what ChatGPT plugins are. But if you're not, we'll just go through some of the plugin examples so that everyone's on the same page. And then we'll jump to the main section, which is how you can create your own plugin. And I will also give a quick demo of a simple plugin that I've made so that you can also see it live. So that's the agenda for today. And to start things with, let me just ask you a very simple question like, what are some things that the basic default model of ChatGPT cannot do? So obviously it can do a lot of things. It can answer your questions. It can do reasoning pretty well. It can code for you. But what are some things that it cannot do? Well, these are some of the things that most of the people wanted to do. You want to search for the latest information. So ChatGPT by default only has information till September 2021, I think. It cannot search for the latest information that is happening. It can also not shop online for you. It cannot read PDF, videos, images, and it cannot do a lot of things that you want it to do. So that's where plugins come into the picture. So you can think of plugins as a way to extend the ChatGPT capabilities. So since default ChatGPT cannot do everything, that's why the OpenAI released the plugin model, which basically extends the capability of ChatGPT. So it does three things. First is that this new model knows its limitations. So it knows what it can and cannot do. Second, it can understand and integrate with other plugins. So let's say someone has created a plugin to browse the web. So now if you ask ChatGPT, the new ChatGPT, some question like, can you search for the latest news? It knows that this is something that it cannot do by itself, and it will automatically use this new plugin to browse the web, look at all the new headlines, and then give you a summarized answer for that. So this way, you can plugins basically allow you to do so much more than what a default ChatGPT can do. So if you look at some examples of this, we have a few default plugins that OpenAI itself have created. So one is the browsing plugin, which basically allows you to search the internet. So using this, you'll be able to do things like find the latest news on AI, maybe summarize the top trending news, or whatever info you want uh, that you want ChatGPT to search on the internet. You can tell ChatGPT, and it will use this browsing plugin, and it will use the Bing API to search the internet, look at all the headlines, look at all the information that is available, and summarize whatever it found for you. So this makes searching the internet, doing some kind of web research very easy for you. Then the second plugin that we have is Code Interpreter plugin, which can basically run Python code. So this is still not released to everyone, I think. It is still in alpha and only a few people have access to it. And even I don't have access to it. But basically, once this gets released, you can basically run Python code on ChatGPT itself. So you'll be able to do things like create visualizations. You'll be able to convert one file format to another. And there'll be all sorts of possibilities that will be unlocked once this gets released. So for now, we just have to wait for it. So apart from these two default plugins that OpenAI itself has created, there are also third-party plugins that other people have been developing. So there's one plugin called Wolfram, which can solve complex math problems. There are several plugins that people have created uh, to parse PDF files, and so that ChatGPT can understand PDF links as well. And there are some plugins that have been made so that ChatGPT can search for the latest flight and travel informations. So you can just tell ChatGPT, can you just find a latest flight for me, which is from this location to this location and sorted by price, and it will search it for you. And apart from this, there are several. I think currently there are like hundreds and 200s of plugins that have been made already. This is a new space, so people are still experimenting and brainstorming. People are trying to figure out what is the best way to create plugins, what kind of plugins will be useful. So this is where we need creative people so that they can think of like new plugin ideas that can be made and which will solve like more problems for people. And that's basically the next topic, which is how you can create your own plugins. So I have broken this section into four subsections. So the first part is basically you need to identify the problem that your plugin will solve. So there are like several problems, as we saw earlier, that ChatGPT itself cannot do. So you need to identify like what kind of problem you want your plugin to solve. So some examples that I have listed down here is maybe you can create a to-do plugin for creating tasks. You can just tell ChatGPT, this is something that I want to achieve, and ChatGPT itself will automatically break that thing into multiple tasks and use your plugin to create tasks in your to-do app. Or maybe some other ideas like a weather report plugin. You can just create a plugin that gives ChatGPT access to the latest weather information, and you can just ask a question like, how do I plan my day for tomorrow? And it will just use this plugin to figure out what's the weather going to be for tomorrow and just use that information to suggest ideas for tomorrow. Another example is a domain availability and registering service. So maybe you have a new website and you want to see what all domains are available. So you can just create a plugin that checks for domain availability, and ChatGPT will just call that plugin to check what all domains are available, and whatever domain is available, it will just register for that domain. So these are some simple ideas that you can get things started with. Obviously, you can there'll be much more complex plugins that people are developing, but if you want to start developing your own plugin, these are some ideas that you can get things started with. So for this talk, I have taken the third topic, which is domain availability and registering service, as an example, and I'll be showing you how you can create this simple plugin for ChatGPT. So once you have identified the problem that you want to solve, the next step is basically to create your web APIs. So you can do this using any framework or language that you're comfortable with. You can use Java, you can use Python, you can use any framework that you're comfortable with. So this example I've done is using Java Spring Boot. So if you're taking the domain register service as an example, we will need two APIs for that. We will need one API that basically checks if a domain is available or not. And we will need another API to basically sign up or onboard my company or my website to that domain. So let's say we have created these two APIs using our favorite framework, be it Java, Python, or whatever. So once you're done with creating these two APIs, the next step is to explain your plugin to ChatGPT. So just creating the APIs is not enough. You also need to explain the plugin to ChatGPT. And the way you do that is you create a file called aiplugin.json file, and you mention like what your plugin is for in this file. So here, just for demo purposes, I have created a plugin called My Platform. So that is the name of my plugin. And I've also mentioned the description of this plugin to ChatGPT. So this is a plugin where you can get your own domain on my platform. So ChatGPT will basically read this file to understand what your plugin is all about. Once you're done with this, the next step is basically to explain your API endpoints. So as we saw earlier, we have two APIs that we were planning to build. One API was to check if a domain is available or not, and the second API was to register for that domain. So you need to explain both these APIs to ChatGPT in detail so that ChatGPT knows how to call the API. So let's take the second API, the check API, as an example. So first you need to mention that this is a get API. Then you need to mention an ID for your API, which is check subdomain. You need to briefly explain what this API is for in simple like English or human readable language. So I've explained that this API is to check if a particular domain is available or not. And then you need to mention what parameters does this API take in. So this parameter takes in a string called domain, which is a required parameter. And in return, it returns me a 200, which is 200 if the domain is available, and 409 if the domain is not available. So I have not probably that thing is not available in screenshot, but you also need to mention what the output of your API will be. So you need to mention all the APIs here and clearly mention what the input and the output of each API will be in this file called openapi.yaml file. So once you're done with this, the next step is to go to ChatGPT and click on install plugin. And if you're developing on local, you can just mention your localhost URL here, or if you have your website, you can put your website here and click on finish, and then you'll be able to use your plugin on ChatGPT. So let me just quickly go through a live demo of this so that you can probably understand this better. So let me just share my coding screen. Just one second. So as I was explaining earlier, so this is the code that I've written in Java. You can use any framework or platform that you are comfortable with, be it Python, C, or whatever, and create your own web APIs. So as you can see, I have created two APIs here. One is to check if a particular domain is available or not. And second is to basically sign up using that domain. And once you have created these two APIs, or like if you're creating a to-do app, you can create APIs for your to-do app. If you're creating a weather report plugin, you can create APIs for those particular plugins. But for the domain registering service that we are currently building, we will need these two APIs that I've created. So once you're done with creating these two APIs, you need to create a file called aiplugin.json file. So here you need to mention clearly like what your plugin is for. And this is very important because your ChatGPT basically needs to know what this plugin is for. Otherwise, it will not know when to use this plugin. So the way it does that is using this parameter called description for model. Here, I have clearly mentioned that this plugin is to get your own domain on my plugin. So ChatGPT will understand this, and whenever I ask ChatGPT to get a domain, it will use my plugin. It will know that it needs to use this plugin. So you need to create this file and host it on your web server. And the file name needs to be exactly like this. Otherwise, ChatGPT will not know which file to look for. Once you're done with this, creating this file, the next file you need to make is openapi.yaml file. So this file is basically to explain ChatGPT that how to use your APIs. So as we saw earlier, we have two APIs. One is to check whether a particular domain is available or not, and another is to basically sign up using that domain. So let's just quickly look how to create this openapi.yaml file. So first I need to mention what my API method is. So I'm using the get method. I need to just mention what this API is for. So this API is for check subdomain. And I need to also briefly mention what the summary of this API is. So this API basically checks if a domain is available or not. Then I need to mention what are the parameters that this API will take in. So I've clearly mentioned that this API takes in a string parameter, which is required. So this is a mandatory parameter that it needs to take in. And I've also clearly mentioned that the API will return 200 if the domain is available, and API will return 409 if the domain is not available. So this is how you need to document each of your APIs clearly, what the input should be and what the output should be. Similarly, for our other API, which is your sign up API, you need to just explain what your API does in a brief summary, and you need to mention what the input is. So in this case, the input will be a request body. And I've also mentioned the schema for this body here. So if your API takes in just a string, you can just mention it like this. If your API takes in a full request JSON body, you need to mention how the JSON body will look like. So in my case, I have just mentioned that this input will look like this. And after that, I've mentioned my responses, which will be 200 if I have successfully signed up the company or the domain, and 409 if I was not able to onboard this organization. So depending on how many APIs do you have, you need to clearly document each of your APIs using this format. And this format is basically called OpenAPI format. You can look up how to create this OpenAPI spec file online as well, and it'll basically explain to you like how to create this file. But just as a summary, you just need to. The purpose of this file is basically to explain to ChatGPT how to use your plugins. So that's the main purpose of this file. So once you have done all these things, you just run your code and head on to ChatGPT to install this plugin. So let me show you how to do that. So you click on this, just run your code, and I'll switch to ChatGPT. So now that my code is running and I have written my web APIs, I have also created my Open API and AI JSON file to explain to ChatGPT what my plugin is for. I can head on to ChatGPT and you can go to the plugins model. So this will only be available to you if you're a Plus user. If you're not a Plus user, this option will not be visible to you. If you just go to plugins and you click on plugin store, and here you will see an option called develop your own plugin. So this is where you need to go. And once you click here, since I'm developing on local, I just mentioned localhost here, and I just mentioned my URL here, and I click on find manifest file. So here, as you can see, it has found my plugin. So the way it did that was, since we created the file called AI plugin.json file, it was able to find my plugin and understand what this plugin is for. So if you didn't create those two files, it will basically give an error here. So after this, you just click on install, and here you can see that my plugin is now available. So if you just so let me just show you a live demo of this. So I'll just prompt ChatGPT that can you get a domain for my new website, mysocial.com. So now once I enter this, ChatGPT will know that the user, which is me, wants to get a domain. And it also knows that this plugin that has been created is to get your own domain. So it will automatically use this plugin because that's what we have written in our JSON file. So now if I hit enter, let's see what happens. So now, as you can see, it is automatically using my plugin, and it basically gave an input, my social, and the output from my plugin was that this domain is available. So now next it is asking me that do you want to sign up with the onboarding process, and it needs some additional information from my side. And why does it ask me that? Because that's what I mentioned in the OpenAPI specifications that this is the request, this is the input that needs to be there for my API. So if I just say that, okay, my name is Avichal and my email is at mysocial.com, and it will automatically use my API to sign up. So as you can see, it automatically called my API, the first API, which was the onboarding API, using the parameters that are required. And the response from my API was successful. So that's how you can use your plugins. This is a very simple example. Let me show you one more thing that you can do with this. So let's say now that the MySocial domain is already gone, let me ask one more thing to ChatGPT. I want to get a domain for my website, mysocial.com. Let's see now what happens. Since the MySocial domain is already taken, let's see how ChatGPT behaves. So now it will automatically call my API because that's the input that I've given it. And now it says key my social domain is not available because we already signed up using this. So now I'll just tell ChatGPT, can you find some domains that are available for me? So ChatGPT will now automatically brainstorm different domains that are available, and it will call my API to check if the domains are available or not. So now if you can see, it is checking for different options like my social network, which is available. It is calling, it is using different domain names that might be useful for me and just checking if these domains are available or not. And it found out 3 domains that are currently available, and it is asking me if I want to sign up using this. So this is a very simple example that you can see, and ChatGPT basically helps us figure out what domains are available, and it also helps us sign up quickly. And there will be more complex use cases that you can develop and think of, but I hope this gives you a good idea of how you can create your own APIs. So just to summarize, we looked at like how plugins are useful and what plugins can do. We then looked at that if you want to create your own plugin, first you need to figure out is what kind of problem you want to solve. And once you've figured out what problem you want to solve, you need to do 3 things. You need to first create your own APIs. Then you need to explain your plugin to ChatGPT by creating a AI plugin.json file. And third is you need to explain all your APIs to ChatGPT as well in detail, what the input and output of each API will be, so that ChatGPT can use your plugin. Once you're done with these 3 things, you can then head on to ChatGPT and install your plugin and use your plugin. So that's the quick summary out of this. Um, this was a short session, so for additional resources, you can go and check out the OpenAI plugin documentation. If you don't have access to create your own plugin, you can just don't worry. You can just go to the developer waitlist and sign up on that, and I think you'll get access to creating your own plugin fairly quickly. You can also check out what other plugins people are making. So this is a very new space that people are exploring. So people are still brainstorming and experimenting with different plugin ideas. So maybe you can think of some plugin idea that will be very useful for people, and it gets popular. And lastly, you can start exploring and creating your own, and you can get your hands dirty and create your own plugin. So that was the demo. If you have any questions or if you want me to go over through some things again, I'll be happy to do it. We still have 5-10 minutes, so you can ask your questions and I'll be happy to answer them. Yeah, so Bill is asking that when you go to the plugin store, you don't see a way to install my own. So you need to go to OpenAI's website and sign up for the developer waitlist. So everyone doesn't have access to it. So you need to go to the waitlist and sign up there. And once you sign up on the waitlist, you'll get access to creating your own plugin. So the source code uh, that I have made is not available. That is just for demo purposes. I created a code. I can look into sharing this. I'll have to see if I can share that. Yeah, the recording will be available. So it will be posted after 1 week on Codementor. So after that, you can go check out the video again. So sign up on the waitlist will not automatically allow you access to develop the plugins, but once you sign up on the waitlist, um, they will give you access within 1 or 2 weeks. I'm not sure what the time period is, but once you sign up on that, they will give you access sooner or later. So Clint is asking what language you need to use. So you can use any language. So you just need to create a web API, and you can use web API. You can create your own web API using any language you want, be it Java, Python. Java and Python are the most common languages, so you will find a lot of resources there. But you can use other languages as well. There's no restriction as such. Waitlist will be in weeks. At least for me, it was within weeks. It can depend on person to person, but for me, at least it was in weeks. So, Tanika, I don't know if I pronounced your name properly. You're asking that if I want to build a school website plugin, is it possible? So first, what you need to do is you need to basically specify like what exactly you want to solve. Um, Maybe you want a plugin that can answer questions from like school related questions. So yeah, you can do that. You can just create a plugin and you have to think about what all APIs you want to make. Maybe there'll be a one API to suggest academic or suggest some resource. Maybe there'll be some API to answer questions. So you can create those APIs and put it on ChatGPT, and then people will be able to use your plugin. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible. Depends on what exactly you want to build, but it is possible. Um, so there's no, so Pierre is asking that if there's any um, markup language with ChatGPT, ChatML, which is needed for a plugin development. No, there's no separate language that is required. You just need to create your own web APIs, and as I was explaining, just need to create two files. One is a JSON file that explains what the plugin is for, and another file that explains what the APIs are for. And that's it. There's no separate language for that. And then two people have asked, Joe, is there a freelance work for creating ChatGPT plugins? And again, do you do freelance work on plugins? No. So at the moment, like plugins are not, you cannot monetize plugins. So this is still in a very early stage. So it's just been like 2 3 months since the plugins have been released, and it is basically like an early stage of your app store. So once, like if you remember, like 7 8 years back, or maybe even more, once Android and Apple released the App Store, uh, people started creating apps, but it was not monetizable. So similarly, like here, you cannot monetize your plugins as of now, but I think in the future, yes, you will be able to monetize your plugins, but at least as of now, it's not. It's still in a very early stage. Yeah, so Sherry is asking if you need a plus subscription to develop plugins. Yeah, you need to have a plus subscription, plus you need to also sign up on the waitlist. You need to do both. And Clint is asking, would you be charged for each prompt on developer account when using the plugin? So you're not getting charged for each prompt. So you just go on the ChatGPT interface and then just ask your prompt as usual, and ChatGPT will just call your plugin and use that information to answer your questions. There's no charge as such. You're just paying for the plus subscription. That's it. Yeah, so yeah, Saminda is asking what is the unverified plugins in the plugin screen. So that is basically, uh, so I'll just, that is the plugins that you have developed that are still not uh, verified by OpenAI. So the process is basically like this. You create your own plugin and you send a request to OpenAI to basically verify that plugin. So till the time the OpenAI verifies your plugin, it will be unverified. So once OpenAI thinks that your plugin is good to go and it can be released to the public, then it will be verified. Till that time, it will be unverified. I think we are nearing the end time. You can still ask more questions if you have, but till that time, I these are my social media profiles if you want to connect. Mainly, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can connect me on my profile name is Avichal Dayal, but you can also connect me on other profiles, other social media channels as well. Okay, one last question. So do you do freelance work on plugins? No, so I don't do freelance work on plugins since like currently like plugins is just like it has been just 2 3 months and you still cannot monetize your plugin development. So like people are just still experimenting. It's still in a very research phase. So people are still brainstorming on what kind of plugins you make. And Codementor, as far as I know, doesn't have any way to like find freelancer plugins. I'm not sure. Okay, I think that's it for everyone. It was a short session, but I hope it was useful, and I will see you later if possible. Thank you.